Hello and welcome back. We're here to talk about South East Queensland and how the Flexurban concept can bring about greater prosperity in our region. So those not familiar, those outside the government watching this, outside of Australia watching this, South East Queensland is the red area on the right hand side. It's made up of 12 different councils and local governments, and the major city here is Brisbane. So if we have a little look at an overview of what's happening in southeast Queensland, the population by 2031 is going to grow significantly. It's going to head towards 5 million people. And that's going to affect every one of the 12 different regional councils quite dramatically. Every one of them is going to have an increased population. Now, within the whole of Queensland, southeast Queensland nearly makes up 3/4 of the population. So it's where the mass majority of people live in Queensland. So what are they doing here? What are people doing? So we've got a chart from the ABS illustrating jobs that people are doing, the percentage of jobs, and quite significant amounts of people are working in health, and then we have quite few people are working down in agriculture. The one thing we've taken away from reading the research in destructive cities is that there are certain jobs that are still growing. Now, on the left-hand side, we have a few that are growing, but we've also got declining industries, which is manufacturing and transport and warehousing. The fact we've got some of these in the major jobs category tells us that we need to sort of prepare for these jobs to decline and other things to take over. But on the right-hand side, we see growing jobs, small employers currently, but these will grow as larger employers. Okay, so when we talk about wanting to grow the prosperity of southeast Queensland, we're looking at growing tourism and growing opportunities for small business. Small business is a major employer in Australia, and tourism is quite underinvested in. Okay. So if we look at southeast Queensland, we've got two primary activity centres. We've got Brisbane City and we've got Gold Coast City. Brisbane's our third largest city in Australia, and Gold Coast is our sixth largest city. Brisbane's the political and economic capital, and Gold Coast is the tourism capital. So these are two fairly important places and two hubs of people for current jobs and future jobs. So we have existing major transport nodes. We have 4 airports, 4 international runways, 4 international airports, and a 5th one being added at Brisbane Airport. Currently, Brisbane is the only Queensland airport connected by public transport to rail. The difficulties faced by travellers arriving and leaving southeast Queensland make it unappealing for visitors, and it adds extra stress to their entire travel experience. It's quite difficult to get from Gold Coast up to the city. There's a number of ways you can do it, but it's not a jump on a train and get to Brisbane Airport. Queensland has an abundance of natural tourism and developed tourism attractions. We've got amazing locations on the Sunshine Coast, islands in the Bay, Bribie Island, Moreton Island, Stradbroke Island, and then inland places in Toowoomba and the Gold Coast to the south. There's probably a lot more than this, but this is sort of, we want you to get an understanding that we have already a lot of tourism driving our economy, but we believe there could be more. We believe there should be more. So, existing support infrastructure. How do we get to these tourist places, and how do we get around? If we're looking at taking the train or public transport, and we want to go to Moreton Island, it can take up to 4 hours. Now, Moreton Island's a fairly major tourist attraction. It would be if people could get there because it's an amazing location. Stradbroke Island is also just as amazing, quite difficult to get to. But the other thing is the airports, those major infrastructure points. It can take 3 hours to get from Sunshine Coast Airport to Brisbane and 2 hours from Gold Coast. Now we've got international flights coming in. That's quite a great deal of time people have to plan for and work around. Okay, so you can also get a car, and the automotive transport is faster, as long as there's no traffic congestion and as long as there's no accidents on the freeways and highways. Okay, so the first part of our proposal is a high-speed rail network. The rail network would connect primary economic hubs secondary economic hubs, and the transport infrastructure that brings people to and from South East Queensland. That'd be the airports. It would also entail taking people to some of the more major natural tourism attractions that we have that are currently hard to get to, like Moreton and Stradbroke Island. Okay. The second tier cities. The existing model is we have a central economic hub that pushes uneven ridership load through the rail network. Government funding is required to provide a financially unviable service. We have our outer suburban area, Caboolture in this case, and we have Brisbane City. So in the mornings we have a great deal of passengers going one way and very few passengers going back the other way. In the afternoon we have all the passengers going one way and very few coming the other way. What we would propose is to try and bring about a network that is paying for itself. Now, you would require a model that has a decreased ride time, so speeding up the train services, and increased frequency of service. But decentralizing economic hubs can create an even ridership and load on the network, and this creates a financially viable rail network, which is similar to the methods used in Japan and Singapore. So if you had enough happening at either end and in between, you would have a more viable network, and the government wouldn't be spending so much money trying to make it viable. So what we would also then propose is that we have villages along these railway lines in between the two major and second tier economic hubs, going out to Caboolture, Ipswich and Beenleigh. So the village concept is what suburbia replaced. The village didn't allow for fast movement of vehicles and was far too pedestrian orientated and only used minimal amount of land. Villages are small, compact communities full of life and activity. Australians travel around the world to see large and small villages, but they come back home and want to live in suburbia. It's just kind of odd. The benefits of creating villages that you get more out of you get a more dynamic and connected neighbourhood. One of the great examples of this, of a new village, is Subiaco in Perth. So looking at what Destructive Cities had to say, small and micro businesses can be a part of the service sector growth, provided Australia's capital cities are restructured to create opportunities, not new regulations. For example, new low-rent, well-located precincts will be required in the middle and outer suburbs. So that's what we're talking about here, creating precincts of activity. So we'll go into this a little bit more. So existing is the suburban model, right? We can walk to the park. If we're lucky, we might be able to walk to a shop or something like that. We can drive our car pretty much everywhere. We can drive our car to the local railway station if we can't walk there. And we can get to most amenities that we need to. But this is heavily car reliant, and it doesn't encourage a great community atmosphere where we're blocked away from each other. So the idea in Flexurban is that we bring everything within walking distance. All of our shops, or everything we need, is within walking distance. It's then connected to the network of faster commuter trains that take us to other nodes along the railway line, and then also takes us to the fast trains that get us to regions far away fairly quickly. Cars would still be used, but they'll be less frequently used. What we would also propose is that the Sunshine Coast has a light rail system that connects into the new fast rail, to its airports, and to major tourism spots around the coast. The light rail network should be used to connect tourism hubs to infrastructure network, allowing for economic growth on the Sunshine Coast. So we're going to do a case study of the Moreton Bay region now. It is north of Brisbane City and has a lot of opportunity for growth. It has a lot of opportunity for tourism as well. So we'll see you in the next video.